could happen. It's happened before. Everybody reads facial expressions. Every culture can do it. Every culture has the ability to do it. You know, I don't know if that thing's shooting in the right direction. That's my problem. Is that okay? There we go. That ought to work. Display rules are culturally specific rules that govern which facial expressions are appropriate in a given situation and how ostensibly they should be exhibited. And of course I've gotten into trouble from time to time wandering around the United States and the world showing too much emotion sometimes. Americans show a lot more emotion than the Japanese or than Asians do. So sometimes you can get yourself into trouble. I told you the story of being down in Oklahoma. I'm going to insult the people of Oklahoma. Are you ready for this? Actually, it's not an insult to them, it's more an insult to me. They thought that there was something wrong with me because I smiled all the time. In Oklahoma, if you're a cowboy, then the first person to smile is weaker. That shows that you're weaker than the other person. Of course, I'm smiling all the time. So they thought I was some kind of a wimp. But cowboys, and it's really funny, they'll come up on top of each other and they'll shake hands. And they both have these real stern looks on their faces. And these are really good friends. And they won't smile. And nobody will crack a smile. So the whole time they're interacting, there's nothing going on in their faces. They're just like blank faces. And so the whole idea was the individual that smiles first is the weaker individual, or is, as it was explained to me, that individual is gay. That was the idea. And of course, here I am, just the happiest guy in the whole wide world, and I've got a smile on my face all the time. So they were just almost positive that I was showing my sexual orientation, and it wasn't what their sexual orientation was. These crazy cowboy people. Anyway, that was the cowboy culture in Oklahoma back in the when was I in Oklahoma? 90 through 94. I was in Oklahoma 90 through 94. Things probably have changed.
I think that
Where am I? Here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I don't need you to talk about display. Thank you so much. Yeah, I can get through this chapter. You guys will be so excited. I talked about the Balinese. That's right. I talked about all these people. There we go. Okay. Yeah, one of the problems that we have in the United States is that we have a lot of hostility. We show a lot of emotion, and the more hostility you have, the more likely you will have cardiovascular disease, because sometimes you have to eat it. Sometimes you have to swallow it. Sometimes you can't display your emotions, and because of that, this damn thing. There we go. Because you can't do that, of course, it causes all kinds of interesting problems. I was having problems with the administration at the last school, not the last school, but the school before, when I was up in Montana. I was having a problem with the administration. They were giving me a hard time. And of course, I try not to yell at anybody. I actually do try not to swear. I can swear around you guys because it doesn't hurt anybody, it doesn't bother anybody. But of course, they get offended if I swear at the president of the college. So I was trying to control myself. And I got fired. I got fired because I got into trouble. It had to do with me doing research. That's why I got into trouble. And I got fired. And about 10 days after they fired me, I had a heart attack. And it was because I was trying to suppress all of this anger I had for what was going on and how they were treating me. And so I had a heart attack. So it is very real. This is a very real situation. Us not having, we have more emotions because we're Americans, we display more emotion, but sometimes we have to suppress those emotions, that anger, that hostility. And because of that, we are more likely to have heart attacks. In a culture where anger is not expressed, people tend to experience anger less intensely, So in places where you're not allowed to be angry, like in Asia, if you show anger in Asia, it's a rarity. You're not supposed to show any emotion at all. And because of that, they have fewer heart attacks than we do in the United States. So they decided, actually there has been a lot of immigration since they, Hong Kong used to belong to the British, and it belonged to the British for like 200 years. And then in 2000, it reverted back to the Chinese, to the People's Republic of China, to the Red Chinese, them communist fellows, in 2000. And at that stage, all of those Chinese in Hong Kong, a lot of the Chinese left. And if they had enough money, they immigrated someplace. And where did they immigrate? They immigrated primarily to Canada, to British Columbia. So there's a lot of Chinese in Vancouver. Some came to the United States, not very many of them. Most of them went to, because they were British, they went to Canada. And since Canada, of course, is part of the British Commonwealth. And Hong Kong, before that, was part of the British Commonwealth. So they just immigrated to Canada. They could go any place in the British Empire, any place they wanted, and most of them chose to go to Canada. So there are a lot of Chinese Canadians, as it turns out. So they did research looking at European Canadians and Chinese Canadians to see if they were different. They gave them potentially anger-inducing scenarios. The Chinese Canadians found the scenarios less anger-inducing than did the European Canadians, so they showed a lot less emotion than the European Canadians did. The most common reaction by the European Canadians from the anger-provoking scenarios was to openly express their anger. So they swore, or they punched something. They got pissed. No, that's not right, because in England, pissed means gets drunk. They get drunk. They got angry. Let's just say they got angry. In the United States, it means anger. In England, it means to get drunk. For Chinese Canadians, their most common response was to reappraise the situation in a less angry way, or to make efforts to distract themselves from the anger-provoking event. And if you've ever been around somebody that was Chinese, if you've ever been around somebody that was Asian, if it was a controversial topic, the individual tried to get you to not talk about it. That's what they tried to do. They tried to not think about it. But as Americans, of course, we ruminate about these things, and of course that's the hostility that I was talking about. We think about this stuff, and because of that, it causes constriction in the blood vessels in our heart. And of course, we're more likely to have a heart attack because of it. As exciting as all that is. The European Canadians felt much anger and tried to express it openly by swearing or by hitting something. The Chinese Canadians adopted strategies to minimize their anger response, and thus they felt less angry. So the Chinese Canadians didn't have nearly as much trouble with the anger-inducing scenario as the European Canadians did. Anderson and Lennon in 2006 measured the blood pressures of their Canadian participants. Both Chinese Canadian and European Canadian blood pressure slowly returned to the baseline levels, just like they're supposed to. Chinese Canadian blood pressure returned to normal faster than the European Canadians, of course. And this is Miss World Canada, as you can see. And if she looks Chinese to you, that's because she is. I know. I don't know what year this is, 2014 or 2015. So a lady that was Chinese actually won the Miss Canada contest. Miss World Canada contest. I know, kind of exciting. Everybody was excited. Chinese Canadians experienced their anger less intensely than the European Canadians and were more comfortable with strategies that served to reduce their experience of anger, whereas the European Canadians suffered from physiological consequences if they did not openly express their anger. In other words, they had a more negative reaction if they didn't express their anger, if they just held it in. So it's good to express your anger. This is one of the reasons they tell you to do that. If you're pissed, then say something about it. Do something about it. You need to dissipate it. What is a good way to get rid of your anger?
Exercise.
That works, not right away, but I mean, if you're someplace that you can do 50 push-ups, I guess you're okay. That'll work. Guess what? One of the best ways to dissipate your anger is by swearing. I know. They did a study. What they discovered was that swearing dissipates your anger level. Isn't that exciting? So if you get angry, go ahead and swear. Go ahead and drop all the F-bombs you want. It's good for you. It's better for you than to hold it in. That's the whole point. Don't hold it in. Just say it. If you're pissed, not drunk, you're angry, then you need to express yourself. And as long as you express yourself, you're better off. All those people with road rage, if they would just start swearing in their cars, they would probably not ram into the back end of somebody or whatever. Whatever they do, they would probably not act it out. All they need to do is swear. I know, it works. It's really kind of amazing. That's why military people are so healthy while they're in the military. After they get out, they can't swear anymore, and they have heart attacks. Tell your dad that. Talk like you did when you were in the military. You're better off.
I have a student who talks like that right now, and he's been at the military for 3 years, and all he says is
That's funny.
all kinds of F words, and I told him one time, I said, hey, stand down, soldier.
Oh, did it work?
Yeah, it did.
That's funny. Yeah, it's good for you. And actually, so if you talk to a military person in a really stressful situation, like they're in the middle of a firefight, that's good for them, is to swear. It really is. And of course, that's what you're thinking anyway. So you might as well get it out, let it out. And afterwards, your blood pressure goes down. It works. So all those people that tell you not to swear, they're giving you a heart attack, bastards. You guys will all start dropping F-bombs in my class. Compared with Americans, negative emotions in East Asians are associated with fewer negative health outcomes and less of a neural response when suppressing their emotions, indicating that it is not as effortful for them to suppress negative emotions. Because remember, they live up here more than we do. They have to, because it's just too damn crowded for them. So they have to live within their heads. So it's easier for them to, they have a less of an emotional response to things. So it's easier for them to suppress their negative emotions than it is for us, because they live so much in their heads. That's not an insult, by the way. I'm not trying to insult them. That's just the way it is. A lot of fantasy, and that's one of the reasons why there is so much really interesting cartoonage coming out of Japan, because there's a lot of fantasy over there. Not so much here. Our cartoons are not nearly as good as theirs are. Right, Jeff? Yeah, Family Guy. Come on. American Dad. What a piece of crap. Simpsons? Come on, let's get real. The English language has 2,000 different emotion words. English speakers are cued by their language to express their emotions. Okay, it's because of our language. Our language tells us to be emotional. It cues us to be emotional. Other languages don't have as many emotional words. The Chiwang of Malaysia have only 8 words that describe emotion, and only 3 represent Ekman's basic emotions: anger, shame, and fear. We have 2,000, they have 8. So are they supposed to show emotion? We got a smile on this guy's face. We got nothing on this lady's face. We got a smile on this guy's face. We got a smile on, kind of almost just about a smile on that kid's face. But Mom's got nothing on her face. The Luganda of speakers from Uganda do not make a distinction between sorrow and anger. So there's a group that doesn't show anger. The Gijingali of Aborigines of Australia use only one word, Gurukaj, to express both shame and fear. So they're not very emotional people. And if you've ever been around an Aborigine, they don't have very many facial expressions. They don't show anything on their faces. Rarely. They don't smile very much, which is kind of interesting. Samoans use one word, alofa, to express both love and pity. And Samoans do smile a lot. Samoans are probably the smiliest people in the world. The Utku of Alaska do not distinguish between feelings of kindness and gratitude. It means the same thing as far as they're concerned. They are the people with face tattoos. The Ifaluk of Micronesia do not even have a word for emotion, instead lumping all their internal states together. The Ifaluk. A different group. Despite the fact that English is a Germanic language, there's no equivalent word in English for the German word Schadenfreude. Feelings of pleasure that one gets when witnessing the hard times of someone else. That's the Germans for you. So you think it bothered them to exterminate all those people? No, they got pleasure from it. They got a good feeling from executing all those guys. Schadenfreude. So if you see somebody else that's flunking, of course, it gives you a good feeling because you're doing well. So that's known as Schadenfreude. We just don't have the same word in English. We don't have the same feeling, I don't think. Maybe there are some people that have Schadenfreude. I've never felt good when other people were failing, when other people failed. The Javanese have a term iklas, which refers to a somewhat pleasant feeling caused by frustration. I know, what an odd thought. Frustration makes you feel good. No, it doesn't. Well, it does for them. In Japanese, amai captures the relative pleasant feeling that one experiences when allowed to emphasize his or her dependence on one another. In other words, if you're somebody is using you or you're using somebody else, amai. So we have a codependency situation, and you get a good feeling from making your wife lick your boots or something. Amai. They're totally dependent on you. It's usually the woman that's dependent and the man is dominant. It only involves the tendencies to behave inappropriately toward a close other as a gesture to demonstrate how secure the relationship is. So you can do anything to that person and they won't respond to it. And that's this really positive feeling you get because they are so dependent on you. So you can do anything to them. And this is one of the reasons why, well, the Japanese are really a lot different than we are in the United States. Infidelity, for example, that would be you showing the world that this person's not going to leave you no matter what you do. That's a form of codependency. I know. Strange, isn't it? I know, they're a different group of people. Uchida, Townsend, Marcus, and Burke's psycho. Yeah, actually, you see this quite a bit in Japan, the MI. Okay? Sorry about that. They're just different, okay? So, sometimes they treat their children badly, and they seem to treat their children badly, but it's not really them treating the child so especially badly. It's the fact that it's an MI situation. The child is so dependent on the individual that they will not react to anything that the parent does. So what we would consider neglect or abusive, they don't consider that at all. They consider it them showing love to the individual. As confusing as that is. Ushida, Townsend, Marcus, and Bergseeker, it's a German word, compared the emotional responses from athletes after an Olympic victory, comparing Japanese and U.S. statements The researchers determined that the Japanese feel especially good when they're focusing on how their emotional experiences lead them to connect with others. Americans feel especially good when they're dwelling on those emotional experiences that distinguish them from others. So the Japanese want to feel like everybody else, and the Americans want to feel better than everybody else. They want to feel unique. They want to feel different. And that's what we discovered by looking at Olympic victors in the Olympics. In 2013, Oishi, Graham, Kesabir, and Gallon Ha examined dictionaries for the definition of happiness in 30 different countries. They found that luck was included in the definition in all but the United States, Spain, Argentina, Ecuador, India, and Kenya. So happiness has to do with luck. Almost every place in the world except for these places. So we can look at people's languages and we can determine the difference between one feeling and another feeling. So luck had something to do with happiness in other places other than the United States, Spain, Argentina, Ecuador, India, and Kenya. If you know anything about the Asians, this cat with its paw raised in the air, this is a symbol for luck. So if you ever go to a Chinese restaurant, you'll probably see one of these someplace or see a picture of it. We have one at home. Actually, we used to have 3 or 4. When my wife was stationed in Korea, this is one of the things that they gave her. They gave her several of these, and she was supposed to put them in her house. She was supposed to put them in her office. She was supposed to maintain these things all over the place in order to maintain her luck. We don't have one here. I don't think we do, but she has one back home. We broke one of them. It's black. I know. I found a picture of a golden. I'd never seen a golden before. They're usually black cats with their fist raised in the air. People who live in countries where happiness is defined as good luck report feeling less happy than those where luck is not seen as an important part of the definition. So if luck is part of happiness, then of course they're not nearly as happy as people who don't define happiness as having to do with luck. Looking at definitions across time in the United States, dictionaries, the researchers discovered that the definition of happiness included the concept of good luck until 1961. I was born in 1949. So while I was growing up, I was 12 years old in 1961. Yeah, I was 12 years old in 1961. So while I was growing up, luck had something to do with happiness, as odd as that may seem. And then in 1961, they changed the definition. As confusing as that may be. So I grew up with luck being part of happiness. But you guys didn't, because the definition in the dictionary is different. Subjective well-being is you see, those guys are all painted, just like us. There are twins. There are Danish twins. Subjective well-being is the feeling of how satisfied one is with one's life. The nations that score the highest on subjective well-being are Scandinavian countries, the Nordic countries, much of Latin America, and various English-speaking countries in Western Europe. These are the happiest places on earth, as exciting as that may be. I know. Those crazy Swedes, those nutty Norwegians, those funny Finnish. Those are all places that have a lot of happy people. Guatemala was fairly happy. Of course, when I was there, it was right after they opened the country up. They had been in civil war for 12 years, so everybody carried a shotgun, which was kind of interesting. Sawed-off shotgun. Everybody's wandering around with a shotgun, 12 gauge, with slugs. So they didn't only want to shoot you, they wanted to blow a great big hole in you if you happened to give them a hard time. And they wore belts of shells. It was really kind of fun. Well, not that much fun. It's a little spooky. Guns go off sometimes, and you don't mean them to. The least subjectively happy people are people from the former Soviet republics and some of the impoverished countries in Africa and South Asia. This guy with his arm up in the air, showing off his bicep, is Ukrainian. And this is a Ukrainian military vehicle, of course. These are some of the unhappiest people in the world. So who messed with our election last year? Well, those damn Russians, it looks like. And the guy that was his campaign manager was colluding with the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are some of the grouchiest people in the world. And there's a reason for it. Does anyone have a clue as to why Ukrainians are so pissed off?
So cold.
It's actually down on the Baltic, or it's down south, so it's not that cold down here. It's in southern part of Russia. Crimea. That's where people go in the summertime for, that's where they have.
They're just always cranky.
I'm sorry?
They're always cranky.
They are always cranky, but there's a reason for it. Half the country is Slavic, and the other half of the country is German. Oh, ouch. So when the Germans came into that area, they actually took over that area. The German-speaking Ukrainians joined the Nazi forces, and they became a lot of them became the guards at the extermination camps, as odd as that may seem. The Germans did. But the other half were Russian, and they were Slavic. They weren't German-speaking. And so their focus was more on Lenin, more on Stalin. Really odd. So that's one of the reasons why there's a civil war going on in the Ukraine right now. It was started by the Russians. Remember, the Russians took over Crimea. Okay, the other thing about Manafort. Manafort, of course, just got arrested for possible collusion during the election, and he was Donald Trump's campaign manager for a while. But he was under the employee of the Ukrainians. But which Ukrainians was he under the employee of? The German half or the Russian half? Does anybody know? You want to guess?
Russian.
The Russians, right. And the guy that he was working for got kicked out in 2014. But he was Russian, and he's up in Moscow now. The guy that he used to work for is up in Moscow. As confusing as that is. Why am I telling you all this? These are the grouchiest people on earth.
Is it because of Marlena? Because she's Russian or whatever? I mean...
You mean the wife of Donald Trump?
Melania?
She's Slovakian.
Oh, she's
Slovakian. My wife is Slovakian. I know. Me and Donald.
It's so weird to have a first lady who speaks the way she does, how weird you speak.
Yeah. With a really strong accent. Yeah, she speaks 5 languages. I know. Well, one of them isn't Russian. I was surprised. They sat her right beside Putin at one of those dinners, and she doesn't speak Russian. She speaks all kinds of other languages. French and German and Slovakian, of course. English, kind of. French, German, Slovakian, and English. There's one more. It's not Russian, though. So don't worry, it's not Russian. They did a similar study of the regions in the United States, and they found that the Mountain West and the New England states had the highest subjective well-being. So the happiest people in the United States are in Vermont, and here, and in Colorado. Well, of course, they're token, dude, so maybe that's why they're so happy. No, this is actually before they legalized marijuana. Anyway, the mountain states and New England are the happiest places in the United States. The unhappiest places in the United States, surprise, surprise, the Southeast, where all of the racial tension has been for most of the history of the United States. In the Southeast, those are the grouchiest people in the United States. So if you want to go around grouchy people, go to South Carolina. Go to Georgia, go to Tennessee, go to North Carolina, Florida, potentially.
Even on the base, is it grouchy?
No, it's not, because most of those people aren't from that area. So if you go to Anderson, is it Anderson? No, it's not Anderson. What is it in South Carolina? They've got used to be a TAC base. Anyway, if you go on the base and you're dealing with the people from the area, the local area, yeah, they're pretty grouchy. Most of the military personnel are not grouchy at all. Because they're from, Michigan, they're from Colorado, they're from Wisconsin, so they're not grouchy at all. Many factors contribute to the overall satisfaction that people have in their lives. One is having money. If you're wealthy, then you're happy. People who live in countries in which they have access to enough wealth to easily meet the basic needs of life tend to be considerably more satisfied than those who do not. So places where people have enough food, they have enough money, like the United States, Canada, most of Europe, not Portugal, the Scandinavian countries, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, all of these people are fairly happy because they have enough money to be happy. As long as you can meet your basic needs. Looking at the history of subjective well-being, only once a country has an average gross domestic product of at least 40% of that of the United States, there is no longer any pronounced relation between money and subjective well-being. And this is a study done by Diener in 1995. So if we look at this map again, we can see where the unhappiest people in the world are. That is the blue. The blue is the unhappiest people because they are so poor. And then it's yellow and then it goes to green, I think. Yeah. Happiest people, the next happiest people are this yellowish color. And the next happiest people are the green, and the unhappiest people are the people in blue. So you can see all the countries with unhappy people because they don't have enough money. Money can buy a lot of happiness if you're struggling to survive. However, it has much less impact if your basic needs have been met. And of course, that is one of the reasons why we have welfare in the United States. In order to make everybody happy, we have to feed everybody. We have to make sure that nobody is starving to death. And of course, that's one of the reasons why we have welfare. Those countries that promote human rights the most tend to have the happiest citizens. Those countries in which people live under the constant threat of being thrown in jail for suspicions of plotting against the government are not nearly as happy. The overall equality among people in a country is associated with greater subjective well-being. And of course, Ethiopia does have a problem, and that's the reason that this runner is going like that. He's trying to show that Ethiopia, there's no freedom in Ethiopia. And he's going like this as if they're tying his hands together. So that was a symbol during the Olympics. He got into a lot of trouble. He had to actually leave the country. His name is Lilesa. And he did that in order to show that his people are not happy. However, look at this guy. He looks pretty damn happy. He's from Sweden. The Scandinavian and Nordic nations have various social policies to minimize differences in opportunities among its citizens. These nations have some of the happiest citizens in the world. So that's Iceland, that's Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. It seems people feel good when their rights are not threatened and they have opportunities that are comparable to those of their neighbors. So the more equality there is in the country, the more likely everybody will be happy. People in individualistic societies were far more likely than those in collectivist societies to base their life satisfaction on how many positive emotions they are experiencing. Positive emotions appear to be seen as the basis of a good life in individualistic societies. And of course, we are happy people. Oishi in 2002 looked at how Asian American and European Americans interpreted their past. Oishi had people record the week that they were having and then asked them to remember the week. While the two groups had similar weeks, the European Americans remembered their week as more positive than it actually was. The Asian Americans remembered their week fairly accurately. Now, why would that be? What is it about European Americans that makes them so positive about things? What's wrong with European Americans. There must be something wrong with them. You guys complain about it all the time.
They don't dwell on negativity.
Exactly, that's it. They don't dwell on negativity. And because of that, they can be fairly unrealistic. Something bad happens, they just forget it. They just don't think about it. They allow it to pass out of their minds. Except for one specific group. There is a select religion, and they are continually looking back on the problems that they have had as a religion. They celebrate the problems that they've had. They celebrate the fact that they're not pure. It's a Jewish religion. The Jewish have all kinds of interesting holidays. Yom Kippur, they have Rosh Hashanah, they have the Day of Atonement. All of these are holidays where something bad happened to them, and they want to remember these times so that they won't happen again. That's their idea. But at the same time, it's relatively negative to think about all the bad things that have happened to you in the past. Isn't it? I think it is. Anyway, I'm not going to pick on any religions anymore. This is Jeff off when I do that. Anyway, but the Asian Americans were fairly accurate. So what's the major religion in Asia?
Christianity?
No. Or way down the list. More Hindus.
Buddhism?
Kinda. Taoism?
That's what I was thinking, Taoism.
Yeah. Yeah. There isn't a real dominant religion over there, if you think about it. It's not like Christianity controls the Western world, Muslim controls much of Africa, a lot of Asia, part of Asia, southern Asia. The Hindu religion controls India. Follow-up research by Rogers, Payne, Wang, and Howe in 2004 found that European Americans appear to be operating under an implicit theory that they should be happy. And since they think that they should be happy, they usually are happy. Now, what's the best way to be happy? To forget about all your, pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. So you don't worry about things. If something bad happens, what's the use of worrying? It never was worthwhile, so pack up your troubles in your old kit bag and smile, smile, smile. That's a song from World War I, actually, and they sang it a lot during World War II. The British did, because they were having so much trouble. So they sang about packing up your troubles in your old kit bag. Asian Americans seem to operate under the theory that emotional experience should be balanced and consist of both positive and negative experiences. Fascinating, because part of Christianity, most of Christianity has a fairly positive outlook. But there are others that think that the world should be balanced. Remember I told you about the Lutherans. They think everything is balanced. So it bothers them when they have a positive experience, because they're afraid that it's going to be balanced with a negative experience. Oh damn, I won the lottery. What's going to happen next? Something bad, obviously, to balance everything out. Oh good, I just wrecked my car. This is perfect. Now I can win the lottery. Everything is balanced. Asians are kind of the same way, but a lot of European Americans, of course, are not Lutheran. Most of them have a more positive attitude about things, and they try to forget about all the bad stuff. Researchers feel that it is quite possible that many of the observed cultural differences in subjective well-being are based on the different theories that people from different cultures have about how they should be feeling about their lives. What does that mean? What that means is our culture tells us whether we're supposed to be happy or not. What are we supposed to think about our lives? One of the positive things about Westerners is that they think that they're supposed to be happy. But wait until you find out about depression, because you can't be happy all the time. Wait a minute, it gets good. It gets really good after this. Okay. In a study by Falk, Dunn, and Noren Zayin in 2010, Canadian students were asked to choose between a video game that was fun and one that boosted their thinking skills. The results indicated that European Canadians were more likely to choose the fun game, whereas Asian Canadians were more likely to choose the useful game. Okay. So the European Canadians wanted to have a good time. They were just there for a good time. I talk about being here for a good time all the time. But Asian Canadian, if I were an Asian professor, and I were teaching this class and I was 68 years old, then probably I wouldn't talk like that. I would talk about teaching you all this wonderful things that you were supposed to know. And this is very important, and I'd probably not be as flexible with your assignments and whatnot. In the same study, students were asked to select university courses from a fictitious set of course descriptions. European Canadians were more likely to choose the courses that sounded like fun and interesting compared with Asian Canadians who focused more on the perceived utility of the courses. Once upon a time, I had a student from Bangladesh. Bangladesh, of course, is in Asia. When he selected his courses, I would talk to him about, oh, this is going to be a fun course. You'll have a good time in this course. Well, actually, I was talking him out of taking that class. I didn't know it at the time. I was trying to talk him into coming into the class and having a good time. Because that's the way I try to teach. I try to have a good time. If I'm having a good time, you guys are having a good time. Did I have you something? Don't worry about it. Okay. We're all here anyway. Anyway, so yeah, it was really kind of funny. It took him 2 years. He changed his major 2 times before he finally admitted that he wanted to be a psychologist. And the reason he didn't start out as a psychologist is because he wanted something utilitarian. He wanted something that he could take back to Bangladesh and fix people with, or fix the country with. So initially he was a computer scientist, and then the next year he became an environmental scientist. And then finally, his 3rd year, he started studying psychology. And of course, that's what he wanted all along. He wanted to have a good time. Of course, that's the only way I teach. If I'm not having a good time, I don't want to do it. I'm just here for a good time, Jeff. Damn it. And you can tell everybody that I'm just here for a good time. Asian Canadians seem less interested in the idea of doing things for the sake of anticipated positive feelings compared with the European Canadians, obviously. So the European Canadians are wanting to take the fun classes, and the Asian Canadians do not want to take the fun classes. As a matter of fact, they feel guilty if they take a fun class and have a good time in class. I had a student who was from China. She was from Shanghai. Except that's not the way she pronounced Shanghai. And that's not the way she spelled it either. But she was from Shanghai. Most crowded place in the whole world. It is so crowded, ridiculously crowded. She lived in an apartment on the 23rd floor. And it wasn't the tallest building in the area. That's how crowded it was. She'd never seen anything green. She complained about the fact that we had all of this grass, all this open area that we weren't utilizing. What's wrong with you? You're not utilizing all that. You should build a building there, or you should put somebody there. What in the world are you doing with this open park, with this park in the middle of Clinton, Iowa? She was complaining about it. So she was a psych major. She wanted to be a psych major. So she took the other guys, and the other guys, of course, they forced her to do all this other stuff. Then when she took one of my classes, we had a good time. And she hated it. She hated it. She hated the fact that she was having such a good time. She despised it. She said, "You're not a good teacher. You don't teach me anything." I said, "What do you mean I don't teach you anything? Look, you have the highest grade in the class. You've learned everything I tried to teach you. Nobody else picked up all this stuff." She said, "You didn't force me to learn. It was my fault because I didn't force her to learn." She learned it all anyway. I don't know. It was quite confusing. She wouldn't take me. She wouldn't take my classes because I didn't force her to do things. It made her not feel good to feel happy. As confusing as that is. She was only there for 1 year. She transferred out. First of all, she couldn't stand the food, and the second thing was that I was too frivolous for her. I know, I should change. I was going to change just for that one chick. It could have happened. She was taller than me too. She's like tall and skinny. Volleyball player. But she quit the volleyball team because they didn't work hard enough. They weren't serious. They laughed too much during practice. She couldn't stand it. As confusing as that is. Ya Win was her name. So if you ever run into Ya Win, like she's the only Ya Win in the world. I have some pictures. She actually painted me some pictures downstairs. So if you ever come to my office, I'll show you Ya Win's pictures. They're pictures of cherry blossoms, which sounds Japanese, but of course she's Chinese. Life appears to be less about a pursuit of happiness for people with Asian cultural experiences than it does for Westerners. We're just out for a good time, and they think that we're being frivolous, as Ya Win told me. I was being frivolous. I'll even show you, she signed it. I'll even show you where she signed it, in Chinese. European Americans report experiencing many positive emotions and less depression. She wrote me a letter later, about 6 months later. She went to, where did she go? Someplace in Philadelphia. It wasn't Temple, it was another school. Anyway, she wrote me about 6 months later, and she said she missed me because I made her laugh. I didn't make her laugh. It's like Brandon. I can't make Brandon laugh. I can't even make him smile. But she said I made her laugh. She must have been laughing in her room because she never laughed in class. As a matter of fact, she always had a kind of a serious look on her face, like she was pissed off at me about something. Fascinating. European Americans report experiencing many positive emotions and less depression. East Asians who report having many positive emotions are no less at risk for depression than those East Asians who report having very few positive emotions. Positive feelings do not seem to carry the same protection against depression in East Asia as it does in the Western world. So we try to have positive emotions to combat depression. Asians, of course, they don't need that like we do. Grossman and Krauss in 2010 investigated Russian and American personalities through vignettes and discovered that Russians were more likely to identify with the stereotype of the Russian brooder than were Americans. So if you know anything about Russians, they're kind of grumpy, grouchy people. And this may be one of the reasons why, well, when they went into all those other countries that were Slavic, but they weren't Russian, they made them into grouchier people because Russians don't smile. They're brooders. They brood a lot. Not a brooder house is a place where you raise chicks, but they weren't raising chickens. They were just being grouchy. Anyway, okay, we're going to talk more about the Russians in the future. Russians are fascinating people. Reflective Americans were more prone to depression, but Russian brooders tended toward less depression. So by brooding, by ruminating about things, they were actually less depressed than Americans were. So we are far more emotional than the Russians are. Now, if there really was Russian collusion, you have to ask yourself, why did the Russians want to mess with our election? What did they get out of it? Why would they do it? Is there a reason for it?
Because of Hillary Clinton and the Benghazi thing.
Why would they care about the Benghazi thing? It didn't have anything to do with it.
But she funneled all that money, right? And somehow Benghazi was like a scandal that turned in was something wrong from her. I don't know.
That doesn't have anything to do with it, right?
But it does.
They are evil. I'm not going to... Okay. They have different ideas. Benghazi is in Libya. Why in the world would the Russians care about what's going on in Libya? They didn't have any control over the Libyans. They didn't have anything in Benghazi.
Aren't they like siding with Libya though? Where they're together with them?
There's no government in Libya.
Well,
so-
Iran is that's who they're. I don't know, I have to call my political lady.
Okay. She'll tell you exactly how Hillary Clinton funded money to the Russians? Or away from the Russians?
They funnel money to her.
Oh, they funneled money to her. But then they made sure that she lost the election. It doesn't make any sense.
Is it because Trump's easily manipulated?
I'm sorry?
Is it because Trump's easily manipulated? This nigga.
I don't know about how easily he is manipulated. Money means a lot to him. I'm not exactly sure. We haven't seen it yet, but I guess we'll figure it out. I know, we had our first indictment yesterday. I'm so excited. Manafort, Gates, and Papadopoulos. So exciting. So we'll get to watch this. It's going to be fun. A lot of politics. A lot of fun stuff. Brooding over negative emotions, while common in Russia, does not lead to Russians feeling depressed as it does for Americans. So if we sat around and we just brooded about one thing or another, about a lost love or whatever, we would get depressed. Russians, it doesn't work that way. And so if you read Russian literature, which is fascinating, if you read Tolstoy or you read Nabokov or you read, who's the guy that wrote Pasternak? Pasternak wrote Dr. Zhivago. Fascinating stuff. Russians seem to be grouchy all the time, and that's okay. But because it doesn't mean depression. They're not going to commit suicide. Russians don't commit suicide nearly at the rate that we do in the United States. When we get upset, we brood about it and then we off ourselves. But the Russians don't do that. Even though they look grouchy. This is a picture of Russians, and as you can see, there's nobody smiling. Anywhere, there's nobody smiling. This is another picture of Russians. Do you see anybody smiling anywhere? Hell no. They're Russians. They don't smile. I know. So as Americans, of course, we can get in trouble in Russia for smiling. It's kind of like going down to Oklahoma and getting punched in the face because you smiled at some cowboy. That means that there's something wrong with you. Tsai, Knudsen, and Fung in 2006 proposed the notion of ideal effect, the kinds of feelings that people desire, and that's the ideal effect. They are the emotions that people are trying to achieve so that they structure their lives in order to increase the likelihood that they will experience these emotions. So is everybody after happiness? Is everybody after happiness? Is that what we're after? We want to smile, we want to laugh, we want to have a good time. Is that the emotion we're looking for? So why don't we just smoke pot all the time? That would make us all very happy, doesn't it? So why don't we get drunk every night? That would work, wouldn't it? Can we achieve happiness without pharmaceuticals? Is it possible to be happy without pharmaceuticals? Doesn't your daughter make you happy? She does so many funny things, doesn't she? And it just makes you smile. Your son the same way, right? I mean, every time you're around him, he just makes you giggle. It's the same way with my grandson. He just makes me smile. He's just a happy, giddy little guy. And that's a good emotion. And I did all that without pharmaceuticals. This is exciting. And of course, you guys do the same thing with your pharmaceuticals. What makes you happy, Jeff? Coming to this class. Other than that, you're going to embarrass me, Jeff. Don't say anything else. Don't say anything. Okay. So these are feelings that people are trying to achieve. This is an outlook that people are trying to achieve. And there are some grouchy people out there. There are some people that don't want to smile. And if you make them smile, they get mad at you, like my Chinese friend. And of course, she missed me after she was gone. She wished that she could come back so that I could make her smile some more. But she wouldn't take my classes because she thought I was too frivolous. But she learned as much in my classes as she did in anybody's classes. She did it despite me, is why she did it. Even though I didn't force her to learn all that stuff, she learned it anyway. There must be something wrong with me. For most Americans, ideal effect contains positive emotions that are high in arousal, whereas for most East Asians, ideal effects contain positive emotions that are low in arousal. So East Asians want to feel good, sure, but they don't want high arousal. They don't want to laugh. They don't want to smile really big. If you're really happy, you can feel it right in the middle of your chest. It makes you feel damn good. But of course, they don't want that. They want happy feelings that are low in arousal. They want to just have a little bit of a smile. They don't want to have a big, broad smile where their eyes crinkle up. Sai, Louis, Chin, and Uchida in 2006 looked at children's storybooks and found that American storybooks showed faces that were excited and had bigger smiles than the storybooks for children in Taiwan. Remember, they're looking for low happiness with low arousal. We're looking for happiness with high arousal. We want people to laugh out uproariously. I see that on the back of movies all the time. You read the description and people said, "Oh, I laughed uproariously," which means it was a belly laugh. The researchers discovered that European American preschool children preferred pictures of excited faces more than the Taiwanese preschoolers did, and they also felt more similar to the characters who were engaged in high arousal activities. So when they read books, and of course we have to read to my grandson every night to put him to sleep. Besides that, it teaches him to read. If you read to him, he will learn that it's a positive thing. Anyway, we read to him all the time. His favorite characters, it changes. Sometimes it's Dusty, the crop dusting airplane that always wins, one way or another. He almost is defeated. Somebody cheats and he almost is defeated, and then in the end, of course, he wins. But anyway, and it's that feeling of victory. Another one is a truck. Wait a minute, it's a monster truck. A monster truck that can morph into things. Who is that? He watches this stuff on television. It drives me crazy. Anyway, this monster truck has the ability to morph, and all the monster trucks can morph. And there's an evil truck that morphs into bad things. It's like the bad force. You got to have the good force and the bad force. You have the blue lightsabers and the yellow lightsaber. So guess who he's going to be for Halloween?
Truck, right?
No, he's not going to be a truck. One year he was the bad airplane, and my daughter had to be the good airplane. She was Dusty, and he was Riptide or something like that. I know, it's really kind of weird. Last year he was, who was he last year? Wait a minute. Oh, he was one of the Aquanauts. He was Quasi. It's a cartoon. It's about animals exploring the ocean, underneath the ocean. It's really kind of fascinating. So he was Quasi. This year is going to be Darth Vader. And his mom's going to be Rey from Star Wars Awakening. Only Jeff knows any of these characters. Anyway, okay. He's going to be Darth Vader. He wanted to be a stormtrooper, but he couldn't find a blaster, so he couldn't be a stormtrooper. I know. He wants to be a bad guy. He's always a bad guy. This is kind of fun. The Taiwanese children felt more similar to the characters engaged in low arousal activities, and of course, the Americans wanted to be high arousal characters who had strong emotions. So let's look at religion. Religion's always fun. Looking at the Gospels of the Bible and Buddhist texts, Miao and Sepla in 2007 found that high arousal states were encouraged more in the Christian text, whereas low arousal states were encouraged more in Buddhist texts. So if you read Buddhism, it's a very low arousal thing. It'll put you right to sleep. Like the Bible doesn't put you to sleep. But if you read certain chapters, of course, of the Bible, it'll wake you right up. Because there's someplace in there's about handling rattlesnakes. Some Christian sects include enthusiastic religious practices such as jumping, shouting, and applause. And rattlesnake handling, and I found this picture. Actually, this is against the law now. They don't do that anymore. The rattlesnakes, the whole rattlesnake thing. The idea was that if God loved them, they wouldn't be bitten by the rattlesnake. I know. When I was in Mississippi, two guys caught a rattlesnake, and they decided to play Russian roulette with the rattlesnake. Are you ready for this? They kept throwing it back and forth.
Did it get both of them?
They both died. It bit them both. Idiots. Rednecks from Mississippi. Oh my God. What a bunch of goofballs. European Americans are more likely, how many? European Americans are more likely to engage in active individual activities such as jogging and rollerblading. We're very active people. If you've ever been around Asian American tourists, no, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to sweat. They want to walk. They pursue passive activities like sightseeing and picnicking, anything to keep them from sweating. But of course, as Americans, we want to mountain climb. Every time I see a mountain, I want to climb up the mountain, see how long it takes me to get to the top. That's why I walk the stairs every Monday and Wednesday. Make my legs stronger so that if I go on vacation, I can rollerblade or do whatever. I'm more American than I am Asian, certainly. European Americans are more likely to prefer fast tempo and exciting music, whereas Chinese are more likely to prefer calm music. So when you listen to music, K-pop isn't nearly as loud as, or J-pop, it's not nearly as loud or as boisterous as American music. No offense to K-pop or J-pop. This is Quiet Riot. They're all dead now. They all overdosed. Well, no, this guy's not dead. Those two are dead. That's the lead singer. He overdosed. Oh, they're a cool guy. I know. Among Westerners, interpersonally disengaging acts feel especially good. Subjective well-being is associated with positive feelings. People operate under the implicit theory that more positive feelings are better. Positive emotions serve as a bulwark against depression, and high arousal positive emotions are preferred. So we try to be as happy as we possibly can. As a matter of fact, Jeff has sworn that he's going to watch the ball game. You can't watch the ball game tonight, can you? You've got class.
Yeah.
But you want to watch the ball game because when Houston wins the World Series, it's going to make you feel really damn good, isn't it? Okay. And if you didn't want that, you wouldn't watch the game. But then again, of course, hopefully you'll get in on the end of the game. You'll get to see their victory, the first time Houston has ever won a world championship. The World Series, as exciting as that is. I remember Houston, when Houston first started playing ball. They were the Houston Colt 45s. They had a first baseman by the name of Rusty Staub. He eventually made his way up to Montreal, but Rusty started in Houston, and he was their first, and he was a power hitter, first baseman. Anyway, that's Houston Astros. So that's the reason you want to watch this game, because it's going to give you strong feelings of emotion. So we watch movies, and our movies are very emotional movies. They tend to be very emotional movies. We like action movies. We like all kinds of killing and blood and gore. And we like to be scared. I mean, this month, oh my God, every movie on television is Friday the 13th and Halloween and Pumpkinhead and just all kinds of Freddy Krueger crap is on television trying to scare the bejesus out of us. Who's that little doll that...
Chucky.
Chucky, yeah, Chucky. Oh my God. Chucky's girlfriend, Chucky's aunt. I don't know. There's all kinds of Chucky shit on the movies these days. Oh, Chucky. Among East Asian interpersonally engaging acts feel like especially good. Subjective well-being is associated with appropriate role behaviors. People operate under the implicit theory that it is good to experience both positive and negative feelings. In the United States, we try to stay away from negative feelings, but in Asia, that's okay. They don't try to stay away from negative feelings. Positive emotions are not associated with less depression, and low arousal positive emotions are more sought after than anything else. So we very rarely get big smiles. That is not a real smile. These are the smiles we get from Asians. These are the smiles. Well, that's not real, and that's not real. Those are both fake smiles. So that, as far as they're concerned, this is the way to be. You need to have this smile on your face. Whereas Americans, of course, we're seeking big smiles. This is what we're seeking extreme emotions. We're seeking a lot of arousal. And that's why you're going to watch the ball game tonight and get all excited about Houston hitting so many home runs. They're saying the balls are juiced. They're saying they're flying out. They've set a record for home runs in the World Series already. And they've only gone through 5 games. This will be the game 6. Oh, wait a minute, it's in Los Angeles. Not that easy to hit home runs in Los Angeles. Oh, I'm all done with this chapter. Okay. How am I doing on time? 11:38. Okay, we can start another chapter. This is the 11th week, and guess what? I'm starting on chapter 11. So here I am. I'm like kind of caught up. This is the chapter about sex. I apologize. If you guys don't want to talk about sex, we can talk about something else. It's psychology. Psychology is all about sex. Well, it is for me. It's the only reason I study psychology. What's that? I don't understand. Okay, physical attractiveness. How do we know when somebody's physically attractive? Besides having a green face. There we go. I know. Or, paint. We have to paint our faces. In the Padwang, in the Thai mountains, the women elongate their necks by several inches by inserting a number of brass rings around their necks, making, as they grow up, they do this, and it makes them look like they have long necks. They don't actually have long necks. What they actually have is compressed clavicles. Their shoulders are pushed down, and so it makes the neck look longer. As confusing as that is. Aren't they attractive? You want to see somebody hot? Are you ready for this? Ooh, hot stuff. Among the Mersey in Ethiopia, the women stretch their lower lips by inserting progressively larger ceramic discs in a hole that has been cut through the lip. What could be hotter than this? I mean, hubba hubba, right? Look at that. Oh, plates. She carries her own plate around. This is like perfect. What? How does she eat?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, do they pull it out and then eat it?
They put the food inside the mouth. So they open the mouth up and put the food inside. So they're chewing at the teeth. You need your lip to chew. How do they speak is my question. I hear, this is toasty. The Mentawai women from Indonesia file their teeth into sharp points so that they have a smile that is very much similar to a shark. Hubba, hubba. That's what I'm looking for. Coneheads, if you've ever seen the Conehead movie, they had sharp teeth. Wait a minute, didn't they get their teeth capped? Yeah, so that they look more normal. Okay. Yeah. I've always wanted to date somebody with a mustache. A lady with a mustache. The Ainu women of northern Japan often tattoo their faces in what looks like a mustache around their lips. This one is actually tattooed. This is not a real tattoo. She's older, younger. Anyway, yeah, they tattoo. Looks like they have a mustache, which is always, I find mustaches extremely attractive in women. Oh, there's me. Western women darken their eyelashes with mascara, trim their eyebrows, and paint their lips with lipstick. This is one of my old students. She was madly in love with me. She couldn't help herself, I guess. But she was always taking selfies of the two of us together for one reason or another. It's kind of funny. This was the last time I saw her. This was at graduation. When the year they closed Ashford, which is 2015. Anyway, there she is. She's got this really strange, I don't know, I don't understand this whole thing. She's got those posts in her cheek. For some reason, I never figured it out. She is Hispanic, obviously. I mean, you can tell by looking at her, she's Hispanic, and she wears a lot of makeup. If she doesn't wear makeup, you don't recognize her. She's fairly attractive without her makeup, but she always puts on her makeup. I had a girlfriend once upon a time. I know that seems fairly odd that I had a girlfriend once upon a time, but she would never let anybody see her without her eye makeup on. So even if she went out to, you couldn't like knock on the door at 8 o'clock in the morning, she wouldn't answer the door because if she didn't have her makeup on. It was weird. She wouldn't go out of the house without her eye makeup on. She was a native lady. She was Mohawk. She was actually from Chillicothe, Ohio, but her dad was from Upper New York State. He was a iron walker. He was a high, he walked the iron, and he got drunk one time and fell off. I'm laughing at her loss of her father. What kinds of faces are thought to be attractive? It seems to be a striking agreement around the world. So if you show men from South Africa, if you show men from Saudi Arabia, men from Indonesia, men from India, men from Japan, men from the United States, men from Norway, they will all agree on what is beautiful and what isn't, as odd as that seems. One of the things that they find attractive is skin. The skin should be free of blemishes, blotches, sores, and rashes, and they find that to be very attractive. And this has been going on for an extended length of time. Initially, they found this out in 1951. 1986, they did another survey, exactly the same results. They've done a more recent survey in the 21st century, and they're finding exactly the same thing. We find healthy skin attractive. Males find healthy skin attractive. People care so much about their skin because people tend to be attracted to healthy mates who would likely produce healthy offspring that would survive. And of course, that's what we're after. We're trying to reproduce. We don't want to marry somebody. We don't want to be around somebody who cannot have healthy offspring. That's the whole reason that we're here, is to have healthy offspring. Yes, she's naked. I apologize, I didn't warn you before I showed you this picture. And she is pregnant, by the way. I hope. She's not just fat. No, she's pregnant. Okay. People usually don't think about selecting healthy mates, but their unconscious preferences for traits that are associated with health have been guided by natural selection. Responding to the apparent health of the skin could thus be useful heuristic for sizing up the health of one's potential mate in the ancestral environment. We're always looking for mates that are healthy. And this may be one of the purposes of pheromones. They have done studies where they have looked at pheromones, and what they've discovered is that your pheromones represent your genetic, your immune imprint. So the way that you smell tells the other individual what your immune system is like. So if you have an individual that has a flaw in their immune system, they will be attracted to your smell if your immune system corrects their flaw. As exciting as that sounds. I know, this is really weird. There are some people without pheromones, and most of them are Asians. Most of them are Asians who have had arranged marriages for an extended length of time. The Japanese, for example, do not have pheromones, and I've already explained that to you before. But as Westerners, of course, Europeans stink. You don't have to tell us how badly we smell. We already know it. African Americans have an odor about them. They put off pheromones as well. Hispanics put off pheromones. That may be, I'm not exactly sure whether you guys have pheromones or not, or whether you can even smell all the odd odors that come off of other individuals. But potentially, you are selecting your mate by the way that they smell. And having been married 3 times, I can tell you, and dated a couple times, just a couple times, in between wives, I can tell you that the women that I married smelled better than the women that I didn't marry. I can tell you that. Okay. I didn't marry anybody that didn't smell good. Odor is very important to me, as odd as that sounds. My wife came to visit me on my birthday, and she was making a cake for me. And my wife, of course, is a military person, so she does everything by the book. So she read the back of the box, and the box told her that she needed to cook it for, 35 minutes. So she set the timer on 35 minutes because she's a good soldier, and she was going to do exactly what they told her to do. So she put the cake in the oven, but our oven is a little hotter than it's supposed to be. So at about 28 minutes, I told her, I think the cake is done. And we've lived together for 38 years, and she knows that if I think that something is done, it probably is done. And she went to take the cake out of the oven, and it was perfect. At 28 minutes, and it's supposed to cook for 35. By God, if she had been a good soldier, she would have cooked it for 35 and burned the son of a bitch right there, right into the pan. But she knows that I have a good sense of smell. I know. So smell is really important to me. So I married 3 different women, and the reason I married them is because of their odor, as odd as that sounds. So potentially, if I'd had children with all of my wives, then we would have produced healthy offspring. And both of my kids are healthy as horses. And my grandson is very healthy. Okay. We have this amazing ability to heal. If we cut ourselves, the sore is gone in a couple days. I mean, it's healed, completely healed. I had surgery on my forehead. They chopped out a cyst on my forehead. And they did it on Tuesday. And by Thursday, it was completely healed up. I went into the doctor to get the stitches out. He said, you're not supposed to come back for 10 days. I said, look, it's all healed. He said, it's probably not. And then he looked at me and he said, oh, it really is. So he took the stitches out. 8 days early. My problem is the stitches grow into my skin. My skin encapsulates it. So when they go to pull them out, yeah. He needed to take them out. Anyway, what are we doing? Responding to apparent health of the, okay. So healthy skin is really important. Odor is really important. So what are we looking for in a mate? We're looking for health. We're looking for healthy people that will produce healthy offspring. Second characteristic that appears to be universally viewed as attractive is bilateral symmetry. We are most attracted to people whose left sides of their faces and their bodies look identical to their right sides. The reality is that the way our faces are formed, they're formed in 2 halves, and then the 2 halves are joined together. You can tell that if you take your tongue and stick it up into the between your lip, you'll find that there's a chunk of skin right there. There's a chunk of skin right there. What that is, and if you've ever seen anybody with has a hair lip, an individual with a gap right in the middle of their face, that's because their faces didn't form together correctly. So the healthier you are, the more you maintain the pregnancy during the entire pregnancy, the more likely that the 2 halves will form together and be identical. That's what we're looking for, symmetry. And I'm going to show you some pictures of symmetry next time. I'll see you guys next time. Have a happy Halloween. Don't eat too much candy. As Andrea has already eaten way too much candy. You poor thing. It looks like Chris is willing to take the candy off your hands. He's got a candy bar back there. Yeah. It seems to me like I should get that candy bar since I'm all dressed up. And I may trick him if he doesn't treat me. Probably not. Let me turn this off.